So I'm going to be talking about
Share
IoT Disruptions
your
2020. Yep.
Your screen is not here.
We are not seeing your screen,
Yeah,
Sudha.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, so here.
Ah,
we
perfect.
go.
Okay, good.
So I want to go back to the beginning. Okay, so instead of just talking about my bio, I thought I would give you a sense of what I do. And if you noticed, I go chase cars. I teach autonomous vehicle business at Stanford Continuing Service. And I also do different talks. And so I ended up, you saw I was hugging robots. Those are all the things I really do. I mean, I think you should know that before you spend the next 20 minutes listening to me saying, what do you do with IoT in 2020? Okay, so the picture you're seeing here is a book I wrote called IoT Disruptions 2020 in 2016. I wrote that. It was a Stanford edition because that was the class textbook for my Stanford class. I was teaching on the topic. And I found that IoT was becoming something about IoT and AI. And so I wrote this more like a futuristic lens saying, what is 2020 going to look like and how is IoT going to help us to get there? And this is my newest Portuguese translated version of this book that is going to launch on Amazon, and you'll be able to find it on Amazon. It is just been published, so it's not yet officially approved, so it should be out in the next couple days. And it is basically the same book translated, but a little forward about how much of what I said in the beginning in 2016 is still valid today. And more than the sneak peek of the book, you're going to hear that from me right now. And is there an option for audience to be able to talk to me and communicate? And is that even possible?
They can send questions, Sudha. And after your talk, we are gonna, if you have time, you're gonna read some of the questions for you.
Okay, so it will be on the chat. I won't be able to see the chat right now, right? If I ask them questions, they will be able to chat.
If you ask, no, but they can ask questions for you.
Okay. So right now I'm seeing question and chat window, but they're not asking me anything.
Yes, yeah, questions. If you see the questions, yes, you're gonna see the questions there.
Okay. And before I go into the topic, I want to thank Mr. Mehta and Abing for actually, even giving me a taste of what IoT in Brazil is. You invited me last year to the IoT summit by Abing, and I was blown away of what was happening in Brazil and the potential and what was happening in terms of various industries. And so I'm very thankful that you brought me here to talk to this audience. So I appreciate that. And so after this, given that it is short window, if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn, people want to follow up, I will always find time, and that's my promise. Okay, so what I'm talking about is IoT Disruptions 2020. What is relevant? What should be the focus of IoT? Where are the opportunities? So when I wrote this in 2016, I had written about futuristically, healthcare was one big field. I said that is going to be impacted by IoT. We would get to a place where things are going to be predictive. We could have biometrics and biochips and the stuff and things like that. We are still healthcare, I would say, is the #1 industry that is being disrupted. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, it is even more obvious that it is. And every part of the healthcare ecosystem is woken up and is trying to save us. And here is a time like no other time, where when you build something with technology, we always hear how technology is an enabler. We should not do technology for the sake of technology. I agree, though I get very excited about technology. But many times they would say, what are you going to do? Are you going to save life? And now for the first time, we are in a place where everything we want to focus on can really save life. So when I showed my bio and I said, oh, I talk, I like to chase cars and I teach autonomous vehicles. So all the cars you saw in the videos were autonomous vehicles. And every time I'm driving around and I would see another different looking autonomous vehicle, I would immediately stop and go chase it. Maybe not chase it, but follow it at a safe distance. So what does that mean? That sounds crazy when we are in the middle of a pandemic and think, okay, is autonomous vehicle useful? Is that some superfluous technology? So here is what I found recently. This is Mayo Clinic, is one of our healthcare networks. And what they have done is they have basically taken partnership with one of the companies which offers an autonomous vehicle. And some of them are testing out as self-driving cars to offer that as robot taxis for us. And some of them are testing, saying, we can do short rides. So if you actually see, it has seats inside, thinking it is going to give a ride to a bunch of people. And instead, what they have done with COVID-19 is they said, okay, if somebody is going to take samples of all the tests, so they test people in some center, in some health facility, and then they ship it somewhere to send out the test samples, then that person could get contaminated, and then you need all kinds of gear for them. And so what they've done is they basically said, how about if we make this autonomous shuttle collect the samples? So one of the problems you would hear when you hear about anything that is autonomous is the last mile problem, saying it's not going to pick it up, it's not going to hand over. So we need to solve for it to become level 5 and then we'll get to it. No, this is what we've got. We have a problem that we don't want another human getting contaminated because that is their job. And so here we bring autonomous vehicle as shuttles to carry test samples. So here is something that's happening for real, and I thought that you should know it. And I hope, when we were talking about last year at the ABINC conference, we were talking about we could use autonomous vehicles in mining, in dams, and other places where it makes sense from a cost efficiency. That's not going to go away. Once this is over, we go back to work, we are still going to need it in all the industries. This just is going to help the technology continue to improve and keep iterating to get better for us. So by the time we are ready to use this elsewhere, this is not something that we put on a hold and we did in decade as an old technology and we have to pick it up. So here is one example. And so if I look at it as an industry, I would say mobility is one of the industries that has already started going through a transformation in terms of ride sharing instead of the bikes that we see everywhere. Even in Sao Paulo, I saw them, a lot of different bikes you can take and go from one place to another. It's just like ride sharing. And then the autonomous vehicles like this for mining. Now, all of that is going towards changing mobility as we know it. Mobility, and I used to talk about this before we all were like, in lockdown and practicing social distancing. I used to talk about what is mobility. We have trained ourselves that we have to get up in the morning from a place called home, and we have to go to this place called work. We have to go from this place called home to a place called shop, where we will go buy things. So now when we are not allowed to move, suddenly that whole mobility concept is challenged. And that is what the autonomous vehicle was doing, saying, why do you have to buy a car? Why do you have to maintain a car? Why do you have to learn to drive a car? Why do you have to go in traffic? And now, instead of that looking like a superfluous convenience, it just challenges. It's not like we're going to sit at home and never always work remotely, but it just changes our thinking. So it is going to help us with a bigger digital transformation of industries like automotive and transportation and logistics. So that is one. And then in terms of healthcare, they are able to help us in so many different ways. So the supply chain of retailers, where we are buying things, and so we don't want to pick up, we want them to be delivered. So in US we have this, as soon as they said, Silicon Valley said this ahead of everybody else, they said you just need to not do this thing, you just need to freeze and stay put. And first they told us 15 days. I think they're doing that with most countries. They'll say 15 days and then everybody doesn't listen, then they extend it a little bit longer. So they told us, as soon as that happened, people said, okay, we will buy things. So obviously they went crazy and started buying stuff from the shops. And then we don't get enough inventory in the shops, because the other topic I teach about is about artificial intelligence. And in there, it is all about managing historic pattern, looking at what is anomaly, and managing your supply chain, managing your inventory, managing your maintenance, everything to make it more predictive. And now we suddenly have thrown all this data out. And then everybody who was doing supply chain and bringing stuff and saying, in this neighborhood, people will buy 100 loaves of bread per week, and now people are buying 300 loaves of bread per week, and then all the bread and pasta, everything is gone. So that is where we are. So that means there's an opportunity to do the supply chain back again, right? And not just the supply chain for food. So the delivery logistics is also the same way. Now people are all going, our biggest problem here is that we're trying to deliver things, and then we don't have enough options to even buy those things by delivery, and there is a backlog. So supply chain management goes back, and then keeping everything right as it is traveling with IoT sensors. So IoT plays a very integral part. IoT combined with blockchain is a very integral part of managing the availability. And then even like literally our county in Santa Clara County called us by phone yesterday, all of us, and then sent a message on phone as an emergency message and said, we want to know if you have ventilators and PPE equipments in substantial number, come to this website and tell us. We want to know where they are across the state when we need it for an emergency. And think about it, they just don't have that information there, and they're waiting for us to tell them. And what if we don't tell them? Why, how many people are going to respond to that? So I think managing even the supply of medical equipments, medical gear is all one thing, is all coming back to some kind of logistics management. And then now when there is movement and sharing across different places, I mean, I didn't want to make this about COVID-19 because I'm sure you have sections on that, but that is the time we live in when we are thinking of 2020. That is what 2020 has been taken over. So we are going to have IoT come to the rescue and help us. And then the other thing, I had a picture of it. It is not showing up now. When I wanted to keep this picture to show you guys, one of the ad that was showing up here, instead of this girl playing football and showing the census ad, was this infrared thermometer. And I remember in 2016, I wrote about this IoT thermometer that the nurse actually would use for a child who says, okay, I'm feeling sick, I think I want to go home. And the nurse could actually use that. The nurse could actually get a doctor to see the ear of a child right from the front desk in office of a school, and then decide whether it is critical enough to call the parent and get them the right care, instead of just sending every kid home or calling all the parents to come running, and it's just chaos. And if the kid needs care soon enough, they may not get it. If they don't need care unnecessarily, they're clogging the healthcare system. And I was very fascinated by this when 2016, when I wrote about this was a novel concept. It was just launched in one of the counties in Florida, and now we have this infrared thermometer everywhere, because we don't want to make a human contact, and we just want to see whether that person has a a temperature, and that is being used to actually verify whether the person can be allowed into a facility. That is how they are using it to check for in the current situation. So all kinds of medical devices like the thermometer is another example where, you know, IoT, I would say it's a given when you think of medical because of the COVID-19, but healthcare data, biometrics with healthcare, mobility happened to be this example with healthcare, but mobility in general is the other industry. So digital mobility, healthcare and its entire ecosystem. And the third thing is smart sustainable solution, something to do with climate control, climate change, managing climate change. How are we going to do that? So here I found this from IEEE, which actually captured very beautifully, right? What we do when we say we are creating IoT, it is doing fault detection, predictive, we are modeling, and then we are creating user interface or AIX, which is another of my area of research, which is how do you build the right interface, and then getting to a place where we could have, you know, a continuous monitoring of things. It could be assets, it could be cars, it could be buildings. So I would say we are going through this cycle, and many of us who are working with large companies feel like we are not getting here. We are just going here, and then we wanted to go here, and then we are kind of stuck in some kind of pilot. Instead, the one thing I would say is, if I were to broadly say industry, I would say mobility, sustainability, and healthcare are 3 areas of focus. And then in terms of the actual cycle of IoT, going from just identifying a user need and building an IoT solution to creating the right human-centered experience. So one of my recent books is called AIX, which is about designing IoT, designing AI with a very human-centered ethical interface. And so what I found is, if you have the data and you're able to produce it, but you did not create the right user buy-in, the user is going to reject it. And so that has been a lesson from many of the IoTs which look great but did not make it. And so we got to focus, even with all the pandemic, when we're saying, well, IoT is going to do this, IoT is going to do that, but if we scare people, we don't do it with sensitivity in a way they will take it, they are not going to take that. So one of the areas where this is being done is contact tracing, saying we need to know who has been in touch with anybody else who had this disease or potentially was exposed to degrees of separation. Every country is working on some kind of contact tracing app. And we are going back to the age-old discussion we've been having about IoT. It is a balance between privacy and security, and just giving control to some company who's going to run that. And I saw Singapore and China have all the information about, you know, where did people commute and using what mode and when, and they have published this and proudly shown visual databases. And then I heard that Czech Republic says you do this. Carriers have this information, like our telecom carriers know exactly where we are. And if you triangulate that with your financial data, whether you went to, you know, buy something or used your credit card at a shop, combine those 2 information, they can exactly know where you went, who else was near you at any given time. And so Czech Republic, I said, his government is allowing for these 2 data to be triangulated, but then they came up with a regulation that in 6 hours this data needs to be destroyed. So we are getting to a new model of dealing with data, which was another issue with IoT, saying there is value in data, that there is security and privacy challenges with it, and but how we are waiting for regulation, and how are we going to solve for it? There are new models evolving. So with that, I want to stop and ask if somebody has questions. That might be a better way of moving forward.
Yes, Sudha, thanks. So we are running out of time as well. So we have a question from Bruno. The question is, the autonomous mobility will determine the final of gas by the use of the batteries in a short time.
So what is the question?
If the autonomous mobility will determine the final of the gas, I think oil, by the use of the batteries in a short time.
So I think there's a huge movement towards switching to electric because the car is not going to go fill gas. So it is happening. The more companies adopt electric vehicles, then we would obviously use less gas and it would go. But oil is such an entrenched industry, so it's very hard to imagine that it would happen anytime in the short term. So, but we are getting towards that. For it to show an impact that we will not be using gas is hard to see, hard for us to imagine, because it's not just that we have so many byproducts from that, and we are kind of trained to use that in so many ways. But in terms of the fuel of the vehicle, that is actually a disruptor. Yes, it is driving us towards electric and sustainability, because of which we are going to become more green, hopefully. Yeah.